we will say for the Ted Lassos in the room, you typically are so busy taking care of others that you neglect to take care of yourself. In the business of you, we say, if you are the CEO of yourself, oh, and indeed you are, you also are in charge of all of the other companies. So what is HR in charge of? Taking care of their people. Well, you are your people. So you got to take care of you first.
When you think about team environments and the most successful teams, what's one of the most important factors? It's trust. And what authenticity actually does is it builds and it establishes trust. We had a client where I literally deleted all their data. I mean, you want to talk about a horrible feeling. I could have made up some excuses, but instead we found the opportunity to be completely and 100% transparent with that particular client. Didn't have to do that, but it was part of the culture that we were trying to build with both our community, our partners, and our employees.
Welcome to Suits and Sneakers, a series featuring sage advice and candid conversations with seasoned leaders from diverse backgrounds and styles. I'm your host, Carrie Tuttle. With my guests, we deep dive into the areas of team engagement, motivation, and effective performance management. Get ready to be inspired and transform your approach to leadership. Please like, subscribe, or follow to be notified when episodes are released. Let's get started. Today, I am thrilled to have with me two guests, Marnie Stockman and Nick Coniglio, co-authors of two books, It Like Lasso and The Business of You. Marnie went from high school math teacher to ed tech leader before teaming up with Nick to run a software company. Nick started as a programmer, became an executive early in his career, and then jumped into entrepreneurship with Marnie, including selling their company and writing the award-winning book, It Like Lasso. Together, they share stories and strategies to help students and educators turn leadership lessons into real-life results. Their most recent book, The Business of You, is a guide to treating yourself as the most important project you'll ever work on. Marnie and Nick, welcome to Suits and Sneakers.
Thanks for having us.
Oh, we're happy to be here, Carrie.
I mean, fair confession, I normally stand in my office in socks, but just because of this podcast, I am wearing sneakers. I did not put a suit on for the day.
Thank you. Well, this is kind of the point. So with this podcast, like the whole vision is to have backgrounds like everything in between suits and sneakers, right? We learn lessons from everywhere in life, from hard hats, from teaching, right? We learn from everything. So give us a little background for the listeners who maybe aren't familiar. I guess a little bit of background on each of you, but also how did you two link up to start a software company?
So I did start out as a high school math teacher where I like to tell people that I sold pre-calculus to 16-year-olds, which is critically important if you land in the business place and you're talking with a bunch of IT business owners and they're wondering why they're talking to a former math teacher. And I'll say, might know something about selling because, again, could you sell pre-calculus? They're like, all right, lady, we'll give you a shot. We'll at least listen to you. So I went through the education world, did administration, assistant principal at the board office. I was the math supervisor where I was using assessment and data software from the company where Nick worked. And I had lots of ideas on how to use that software, enough so that the owner of the company suggested I come run customer success for them. And much to Nick's dismay, first week I jumped on the call and he said, "You hired that client?" But then he got over it and I'll let him take it from here.
I don't really know how to react to that, Marnie. I was not like that at all, Carrie. But very different background. I graduated university with a computer science degree. My first job right out of college I was a computer programmer. So I was one of those people that, worked in a closet with 18 Coke cans, by myself and really didn't want to interface with people. But then I took a chance and I ended up joining a consulting company where we had kind of experienced some exponential growth. And I was really a beneficiary of that. And the long story short of my career is I tend to join tech startups as employee number single digit and have been fortunate enough to see them grow and scale to a lot of success, the third of which was that company that Marnie worked for. And at the time I was running engineering and customer support. She came in with customer success. We had gotten acquired and acquired and acquired. And as it turns out, the mission, the core values of the company that acquired us last was creating raving fans, which we were very much
All
responsible
about.
for in terms of customer success and customer support. And we found out that they quickly stripped away all of our resources, whether it was our budget, our people, and they invested in sales. And there was a major conflict going on with the core values that she and I both had and the stated core values of the company in terms of conflict was with the culture. It just didn't play out that way. So we decided we were going to start our own company with kind of the way we think a business should be run, core value driven first. We were successful with that. And then, we ended up writing some books. So that was a long answer to your very short question, Carrie, but I hope that helps fill in some of the gaps that are out there.
Absolutely. No, I don't mind long answers at all. And especially because you guys added so much color and story. I love that. So I'm going to just dive into the core value piece because it's something that I think a lot of leaders find like a fluffy sort of concept. What made you key into core values as something that you wanted to focus on? More on that in a moment. If you're listening to this episode wishing you can get more out of your team alongside other purpose-driven leaders who want to be more effective, I encourage you to take a look at my program, Leading with Engagement. In it, I provide training and a practice field to gain confidence in communicating expectations that help team members stretch themselves and wow your customers. You'll gain a framework for giving meaningful feedback that motivates and inspires them to engage. Among other skills, you'll learn to delegate and track performance to free up your time to lead more strategically. Go to teammojo.ca for more information. Now, back to the episode. What made you key into core values as something that you wanted to focus on? I don't know if it was first, but sounds like it was a high priority.
It was first. We were on a Zoom call. The way it really went down is I was probably fussing to Nick about whatever call I had just gotten off of. I'm sure I was complaining about the fact that half of my team had been let go or something. And Nick said, we should start a company to see if we can start a company so that this never feels like this for ourselves, for our employees, and for our clients. And so we said, yeah, we had paperwork that we had started a company. And the only thing we knew is that we were going to run it with raving fans and 5 other core values that were near and dear to us before we even knew what problem we were going to solve or what we were going to build. So we absolutely knew that we wanted to build a company that felt good to work for, to work with, and that clients would want to talk about. And it's critically important because if you feel a disconnect between your core values and they are not aligned to the company you work for, there's a constant pushback. Same thing, if you don't like the core values of a company that you're purchasing from, you feel this friction. It causes stress. It's never any fun. And you really can't work together. We wanted to work with true partners to help them achieve their goals. And that only happens. You don't have to have the same core values, but you need to be aligned in how they're going to work together.
I would just like to add that I was subscriber number 1 to that statement that you made earlier, Carrie, that core values were just fluff. It was just an activity that you would go through. Early in my career, I didn't understand it. And I think a big part of that was we weren't intentional with all the vision, the company vision planning, the strategy. We weren't intentional in defining those. We just kind of picked values off the shelf, so to speak. But it's not until you actually see that clash and you see how, like Marnie said, how troublesome it can become if there truly is a disconnect between how people feel and what they feel their core values are and what the company's actually doing, that you realize what a huge problem it is. And it's funny, when we wrote our first book, It Like Lasso, we got a lot of feedback that is like, you presented a leadership framework, and I think it's kind of odd that you lead with core values when almost every leadership book that I look at starts with vision and strategy. And it's come to the full circle moment, at least for me specifically. Marnie's always known what to do. She's way ahead of the curve on this one, but that it is the critical pillar for any leadership framework, whether it's personal, business, in our opinion, for things to work out the way you want it to work out. So I have fully been converted that core values is so critical to any approach to leadership for, again, a personal, individual, or a business reason.
Well, and getting engagement from your team, like from your staff, is much easier if they can see the values are being lived out in everything you do within the business and the decisions you make and how you operate. So it's easier for them to just hop on board if they believe in it, for sure.
Absolutely. I mean, Simon Sinek's, if they believe in your why, they'll buy your what. That's not just for your clients. It is also for your team. They need to believe in the why you're working the way you work, for sure. One of the things that we would do in onboarding new employees is we had 5 books that aligned with our core values, and we would have them do a book study as they onboarded, and they had to talk about why they thought. We made them read Ken Blanchard's Raving Fans. Why did we have you read this book? And then how do you see that playing out? Because that really holds us accountable as well. When you're not just saying it, but you're asking them to say, what have you seen us do as a company that looks and feels like that? So you know how to make it look and feel the same way from your perspective.
And you eventually sold your company. It wasn't even that long, was it?
3 years.
How did that?
3 years.
It's pretty quick.
Yeah.
Yeah, that seems like a very fast turnaround for a startup, and you exited very successfully. How did your team react to that change and kind of like losing you as a leader?
Yeah, I think we get asked that question quite a bit. I would be lying if I said, oh, they were 100% jumping for joy, thinking that this is the best thing ever. But that being said, they certainly understood, but we didn't make it a secret what our mission was, which was to grow and scale the company to where we did, which was ultimately from nothing. We were 100% bootstrapped to an 8-figure organization and value. But part of the discussion was, to take this truly where we want it to go, we need more resources. We need more investment. We need more support. And I think our employees understood that. That was our mission from day one, was to be the be all end all customer success solution within the space that we were working with. And I think there was a realization that we were somewhat restrained. Now, there were different ways in which we could approach that, but we ended up finding a very good situation where the company that acquired us was in the space. They shared similar values, and they were in a position to grow our offering the way I think we all felt as a team that we should grow. To answer your question succinctly, there was some cautiousness for sure. And did it work out for everybody? No. But at least everybody 100% understood our position, and we were somewhat transparent in the process as we went along. As transparent as you can be. And that's what I mean by somewhat, right? There are definitely things that we could not disclose, but
you signed some papers that don't let you talk about some things, right?
Yeah, of course. Well, and then your journey took you to writing It Like Lasso. And so how did you formulate this idea that you needed to write this book?
We formulated it walking through an airport. So I had just read the book, and when I read a book, I'm annoying because I'm going to talk about that book and I'm going to bring it into all of our conversations and how it relates to everyday life. And so I had mentioned to Nick that I was reading 10X is easier than 2X. And we were walking through an airport and thought, well, if our next company is going to 10X, we should write a book that gets put on that shelf. So that was sort of a bookish idea. But the real reason that we wrote the book is, at the time, Nick had a teenager. I had 2 20-somethings, and we were really trying to help them think about what would help make them successful. Nick often talks about, I came from the world of education, so I've mentored students for forever. As a startup single digit employee. He is constantly hired right out of high school or college students. And we've been both fascinated and frustrated by the fact that some people are successful and others are not. And it's not always the ones with the perfect resume that is successful. It is the person that's willing to do the work and understands who they are, etc. And when we looked back on our histories, we realized that we were following a similar framework that had made not just our company successful, but us successful personally. So instead of nagging our children, although by golly, I mean, if anyone wants tips on nagging, you just let me know. But we thought maybe if we had a book that they would, oh, this is an established author in this space. Maybe they'll listen. Go ahead, Nick.
Street cred. We were looking for street cred with our children. We also, as part of building that company, we had established a lot of connections, and there was a lot of shock and awe, like, oh my gosh, it was amazing in 3 years what you guys did to scale this company. And we were extremely fortunate to do so.
Very.
A lot of things fell our way, 100%. But the next thing was how do we don't want to just tell a story, because I mean we're just the average people. We like to say all the time, we're leadership geeks, not gurus. But the whole notion of comparing it to a TV show was very interesting to us. And it happened to be a TV show that we both loved, that started and stopped in those same 3 years that we started, scaled, and sold that business. And then what I like the most is, when I was watching that show with my teenage son, he was a big football, soccer fan. There was something about it that I couldn't place. And then it hit me. The lead character, Ted Lasso, was Marnie Stockman. How he approached his team, his goofiness, his empathy,
Guilty.
his vulnerability was Marnie Stockman. And we thought, wow, I got her to watch the show, and she's like, we should write it about this. And we realized soon after that there were so many different arcs in the show with the characters, and there's not just one way to lead. It wasn't just Ted Lasso. It was multiple characters on that show. And we just had a lot of fun with it. We didn't think we'd sell, the average first time author sells a couple hundred copies. We're well over 45,000 at this point. It's been a crazy ride. It's been a really, really crazy ride. And it's been a lot of fun.
That's amazing. And I think, I don't know, Marnie and I talked beforehand and said it's amazing that some people don't see the parallels between that show and leadership. And that's surprising to me. But I think there's some really obvious leadership lessons in the show and some subtle ones. What are your favorites?
Oh, I mean, we could go on for days, so I'll pick a couple. My philosophy in teaching was that it was my responsibility to help everybody become the best version of themselves. So the whole notion of it's not about the wins and losses, it's about helping every player become the best version of themselves, I think is critically important in any organization. And he showed masterfully how helping each person become better was better for the team. Rising tide lifts all ships. So the scene in episode 3 where he has gifts for everybody in their locker and their individualized books of, what doesn't just show the character for who they are, but who they could become, what the best version of them looks like, I thought was masterful. I absolutely cheered out loud when they opened the lockers and there were books in there. Nick, I'll let you pick one because we could bounce back and forth literally for 7 hours.
I mean, I'll just name 3. The obvious one is be curious, not judgmental. The whole notion of curiosity drives us constantly, but that's the one everybody knows from the show. I mean, there's what I love about the show is that there's hidden messages everywhere. We have a podcast, and we did season 3, episode 10, and it was the one where they were celebrating Uncle's Day, and Jamie bought Roy a kit from the World Cup, and he misspelled his name with a U instead of an E. And Phoebe's like, Jamie, you owe me £1. And Jamie's like, well, I didn't say any bad words, right? But she's like, but you made me think them. And we talk about all the time, such a subtle message about how your interaction with other people, how that makes them feel, whether in a bad way or a good way. And those little nuggets are just spread all throughout the show. And we have such a good time going through our podcast, rewatching the episodes and pulling those nuggets out. The other one I'll mention is after Rebecca goes out on a date, Roy talks to Rebecca and says, "Don't you dare settle for fine." And what a a message to kind of resonate with you. If we approached everything in life with, "Hey, well, we don't want to just come on this episode and be fine. We want people to be interested. We want Carrie to reach back out to us in a couple months and say, 'Hey, I'd love to talk to you guys about X, Y, or Z.'" We never want to settle for fine. And I just think those there's 3 or 4 of those messages in every single episode. If anybody is thinking about watching the show but hasn't done it, I highly suggest you pick it up and look at it through not only the lens of entertainment, but the lens of how much you could actually learn from just a silly sitcom TV show.
Yeah, the life lessons, right? Like the relationship lessons, the leadership lessons. There's so many. It's brilliant writing and brilliant acting, of course, too. Now, I know you guys believe everyone is a leader. Can you share your perspective on that?
Yes, for sure. So we have rules in the book, and thanks to Danny Rojas, who is the football is life character, we say leadership is life because it happens in the boardroom, locker room, classroom, living room. And what people don't realize is that leadership is really personal, and you have to learn how to lead yourself first before you can lead others. Just yesterday, I wrapped up a year-long leadership program with the local electric cooperative. And as everybody was giving their final presentations to their board, they were talking about lessons that they learned. And they said, "I thought I was just coming to this as a certificate. I realized quickly that I was learning to be a leader, not a manager," which was critically important. But most impactful is I realized how much I needed to lead myself in my own personal life differently. And this course, especially the work around the core values, has made me think about how I am as a parent, as a spouse, as a child, as a friend, and how that has positively impacted my world. So that's my take on on it. Nick, what would you add to that?
I think your take is spot on, and I think it's one of the things that we say is there's titles, right? You could be a leader, a COO, a CIO, leader of some organization, but the reality of it is even if you don't have the title, how you react and behave is critically important. I could be part of a team that is one of 40 people with no official title. I need to make sure that, like Marnie said, I am both leading myself, but I could lead others, lead my peers in whatever it is that I could add value with. We talk about there are 2 learning styles, right? We talk about this more in the second book, but there's this notion of a credentials ladder and a values ladder, and we think that people who learn to create value for others, and that is a leadership skill, is creating values for others. You don't need a title to do that. Anybody can do that. My 21-year-old son can 100% do that with 0 title, 0 job at this point. He's still at university. But that is going to not only help you grow, but those around you grow. And I think a lot of people forget or just completely dismiss the fact that if they don't have a title, they have no responsibility. And we try to get through with both of our books that we all have a responsibility, even if at minimum it's to ourselves. Because if you're not doing those types of things, ultimately what's going to end up happening is you're going to have stress and anxiety. And gosh knows that we believe self-care is pretty darn important. And the key to self-care is leading yourself first.
Mm-hmm. And leaders do sometimes, if they're servant leaders, right? People subscribe to this servant leadership and then often neglect their own needs.
Oh,
Do you talk a lot
100%.
about when you talk about self-care, what recommendations do you have for leaders to take care of what they need?
What's interesting, we have a character assessment in the book where you get to figure out which of 5 character archetypes from Ted Lasso that you are. And when we go and present, do keynotes or workshops for companies or organizations, we come with a new assessment aligned to the same characters. So we'll customize it for whatever role we're talking about. And then we talk about the strengths and weaknesses and how they play out. And we will say for the Ted Lassos in the room, you typically are so busy taking care of others that you neglect to take care of yourself. I for sure, 2 panic attack laters can attest to the fact that that very much falls in line. And so we talk about what you need to do to take care of yourself. So the subtitle of the book is A Leadership Book for Life, Your Life. We almost subtitled it the roadmap at the roadmap at the intersection of self-help and leadership. Because if you learn to lead yourself, which includes understanding your core values and what's important to you, then you can better take care of yourself. And it's interesting, it sort of transitions into the business of you, because in the business of you, we say if you are the CEO of yourself, oh, and indeed you are, you also are in charge of all of the other companies. So you are the head of HR for yourself. And what is HR in charge of? Taking care of their people. Well, you are your people. So you got to take care of you first.
I wanted to ask you about authenticity too, before we kind of dive into the newer book. Ted is all about authenticity and empowering others. And I'm wondering what your take on that is in this hybrid and virtual world.
Well, I think it's harder, and I'll start with that. And in the hybrid virtual world, because you don't have as much human interaction as we typically did in a more traditional type environment. But that doesn't mean that you shouldn't ignore being your authentic self. And I think the one thing that it actually took me a while to realize as I started getting elevated into leadership position, and it seems obvious, I don't know why it took me so long to realize it, but when you think about team environments and the most successful teams, what's one of the most important factors? It's trust. And what authenticity actually does is it builds and it establishes trust within the team environment. And it's funny, I remember I was one of those accidental leaders, right? I just got promoted because I was really good functionally at my job and I had no leadership training. And I ended up leading in such a way that I was leading the way I thought you should lead, right? From watching movies and television and listening to my older siblings and my parents, it was more authoritative command and control type leadership. And the result was really not good because I wasn't that person. That's not who I was. I am more of a servant leadership archetype, and I struggled. I felt like an imposter. Like Marnie, I had panic attacks. And so the whole notion of authenticity is critically important, but I'm going to add that what a lot of people don't realize is there's no one right way to lead. Ted Lasso in the show led completely different than Roy Kent and different than Rebecca Welton and Sam Obasanya. And they were all good leaders. They were more authentic to themselves and they leaned in on those strengths. And while it probably seems obvious at 54 years old, when I was young and first started leadership, I didn't think that was the case. I thought there was only one way to lead. So again, it harkens back to what we said earlier. The most important thing you can do in any personal leadership is to identify what makes you tick, your core values, and then really embrace those and build on those. And it's okay to have some aspirational values, but it has to be in alignment with who you are as an individual, and then start acting like that. Be authentic to yourself, because if you don't, as we said, it hurts you with self-care. It brings in anxiety, and it really involves a lot of stress.
Mm-hmm. In running your companies, I guess, multiple companies, what is maybe a story of something that tested your leadership skills the most?
Well, I suspect Nick knows which one I'm
I know
going
where
to
you're going to
say.
go on this.
So for sure, it is whenever my core values have been smushed up against or conflicted with, right? Nick and I left a company because there was a core value clash. But in the company that we owned, for sure, we had one person in the company that wasn't doing what they said they were going to do, and also would debate. We would meet together and come to consensus on what the core values of the company were, what the vision was, what the priorities were, and then that person would not do those things and really kind of pass the buck until it came to a head. And it pushed my leadership because I aimed to be empathetic and a listener and kind. But as they were getting louder and louder and not listening, it got to the point where I had to get louder too. And so that didn't feel great, but the only way they were going to hear is if I came to their level for a second and then talked about why we needed to get back down to where we were. I don't know if that's the one you were thinking of, Nick, but
Well, I mean, we had so many. I mean, I think building a business, um, I think you constantly are presented with challenges. You can just imagine whether it was launching the business with a go-to-market plan of in-person conferences and then 2 months later getting hit by COVID. So big items like that, or I mean, even more tactical items. I remember when we just had first hired our first couple of employees, and I was on the technical side of the house, and we had a client where I literally deleted all their data. I mean, you want to talk about a horrible feeling. And this was a client that was very loud on social media platforms and just brought on some new resources, right? And I had an option. I could have, because I was the man behind the machines at that time, I could have recovered with some delays, made up some excuses, but instead we found the opportunity to be completely and 100% transparent with that particular client, with these individuals that we had just hired. We were completely and 100% transparent. And again, didn't have to do that, but it was part of the culture that we were trying to build with both our community, our partners, and our employees. And that was a horrible time. I mean, I literally thought that was the end of the company when I did that, because this person was so loud in the community. And we took the road that we thought we should take and that any good business should take, which was be 100% transparent, and exactly what happened. And it all worked out in the end. But we have countless stories about testing leadership. And the best part about it is, they've turned into stories in our book, right? We talk about hiring an individual where it just
that's
was
what I was
not
thinking of.
working out
Yeah.
because there was a disconnect on communication styles and what we were expecting. And we ended up creating something called the personal operating system and communication guide, working with MADOC, and that became a critical tool to our business moving forward. So I think any entrepreneur out there will tell you about challenges, and I think they'd be lying if they didn't say on a weekly basis at minimum, leadership styles and rules get tested very quickly.
100%. 100% they do. Now, in the business of you talk about a couple of concepts like being the CEO and also having a board of advisors. Can you talk more about that?
Well, every good business has a board of advisors. I mean, even Bill Gates has a board of advisors. So if he needs one, we should probably all take note on that. But, in Lead It Like Lasso, we talk about Ted Lasso and his diamond dogs, right? He's got people that he can bounce ideas off of. And it is critically important for everyone to know who, we talk in, again, Lead It Like Lasso about the fact that you are the average of the 5 people that you hang out with the most. And I've talked with students before about like who's bringing down your average. So in the business of you, we talk about the type of folks that can really support you and that you need in order to, you can't do all the thinking alone, and who's going to help you become the better version. So we talk about the fact that you need to have a mentor and a challenger, right? Somebody who is going to be honest with you in the world of authenticity. Nick is absolutely my diamond dog and challenger in that he will tell me when I don't have the right answer, and he will push my thinking and he will question me. And that is often a hard role for someone to fill because you have to have trust there. And then also a connector, someone that opens opportunities for you. And a lot of younger folks don't recognize how critically important having those three people in your world can be to just all roles of your life, getting a job you want, finding an opportunity, mental health wise, they're just critically important to support you.
I'll just add just the concept of the business of you. I think we try to accomplish a couple of things, and one of our driving beliefs is that we're kind of in a midst, which sounds crazy. We're in the midst of a character revolution, right? AI automation is everywhere, but what that means is that traditional skills are becoming commoditized, and it's placing such more emphasis on the human skills, the durable skills, the soft skills. And what we believe is, especially for young people, there's not a lot of frameworks in place that people can relate on how to build those soft skills and that personal leadership. So we use that whole notion of a business concept, and you guys talked about the personal board of advisors, which is important for a business, but it's also important for individuals. But we like to say, okay, it's not just that. It's not just being CEO. It's being the head of your HR to identify your core values. It's being the head of marketing to understand how to pitch yourself. It's being the head of learning and development to understand you need to build skills with value instead of credentials. It's like being the CFO, and we kind of spin it on its head. We're not really talking about money, but how do you invest your time, and what are you investing your time in? Like the lesson we learned from Ted Lasso and Lead It Like Lasso was using relatable concepts to really outline a framework that people get. We kind of carried that over to the business of you. And honestly, I think a lot of people have given us a lot of good feedback in terms of how relatable it is and how consumable it is. And finally, the fact that we've included a lot of reflection activities to have people be curious. Again, another synergy moment with Ted Lasso is really something that I think it was a gap that we saw, and we're trying to fill with kind of the working with business view concepts.
Okay, based on that, I have a question then. At the end of the week, what do you reflect on and how do you reward yourself?
Well, we do it more than the end of the week. We have a question that we
Okay.
ask each other every day, Carrie, which is, okay, what does success look like for today? And if I can give anybody one piece of advice, that's what I would do is say every day when you wake up, and it could be a week, could be a month, what have you, but we do it absolutely every single day. We had one about this conversation today, as a matter of fact, with you, Carrie. But so what do? We then find people that can challenge us. Marnie mentioned the whole notion of a challenger earlier, and we will basically say, okay, did you do X, Y, and Z? Have you done all those things? And we have fun ways to celebrate, whether it's us buying new swag, with Lasso or the business of you, whether it's us investing in some fun events around the book, whether it's celebrating through one of our newsletters. We find fun and quirky ways to celebrate those victories. And I think that question seems to me like you acknowledge, and you also have identified how important it is to really celebrate the wins that you have, both as an individual and as an organization. So I'd love to hear what you do in terms of celebrating those wins.
Absolutely. Well, sometimes it's something really, really simple. Sometimes it's I give myself permission to read a Garfield book with my son. Like it's that simple. Sometimes it's sharing a bottle of wine with friends. Sometimes it's like a bigger purchase, but it can be something as simple as just time or something bigger that costs money, but it doesn't always have to be. Marnie, what's yours?
Oh, well, I mean, like Nick said, we have a lot of the similar, if we're going to do something to celebrate a company win, and often, like you said, it is with time my guilty pleasures, I'll just sit and knit at night if I've gotten my to-dos done. I mean, the smallest one is I have a fantastic planner and I am a to-do list writer and checker offer. So you can bet when Nick and I decide what success looks like, that will get written down and it will get checked off. So it can be very small.
But it's so satisfying to check it off.
Such a good feeling. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, I have a very important question for each of you. What advice would you give to your younger self taking on your first leadership role?
I think I already said mine, which was to be more authentic, to be myself, not be the person that I thought I should be or other people thought I should be. That would be my number one advice. That's what I tell my son, because once you start not being authentic, being inauthentic, it kind of snowballs into a wild web of anxiety and stress, for sure.
I think I would say you don't have to have all the answers, but it's good to have the questions. I can remember when I became the math supervisor, the assistant superintendent who had previously been my boss when I was a teacher. She said, Marnie, you're like me. If you want things done right, you want to do it yourself, but that won't scale. So you have to learn to build capacity in others, and you have to be willing to acknowledge that you don't know everything and that, you can count on others.
That also takes trust.
Well, that is the problem, is that I just didn't have that trust for a lot of folks. I had to build the capacity so I could learn to trust, right?
Mm-hmm.
Guilty,
Yeah, it's a
for
journey
sure.
What is your proudest accomplishment?
I think professionally speaking, my proudest accomplishment is the fact that we started a business without having any idea what that business was going to do. And it was successful 100%. Personally speaking, it's my family without a doubt.
Same professional one. And as a specific for family, I will say that one day when my daughter was 15 or 16, we were riding bikes and I was telling her that I was interviewing and that I had to give my superpower. And she said, well, you know what that is. And I was thinking, I don't. So I can't wait to hear what she has to say. And she said, you help people become the best versions of themselves. And so then I thought, well, my superpower is raising a 16-year-old who would say that about her mother. So that is, so I was pretty proud of that answer. And then again, same as Nick, for professionally, the fact that we took the risk and went into a space we had never been before. It took a lot of growth and learning and working, and very proud of like the determination, commitment to doing it and doing it successfully.
Well, I feel privileged to have this conversation with you, and I appreciate all the stories and all the wisdom, whether it be Ted Lasso's or yours specifically. And thanks for making that connection for people, because it's a gift, right? Like your book is a gift. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having
Very
us.
kind. Thanks,
So
Carrie.
before we go, how can people get a hold of you or get in touch with you?
Well, we are easy to find on LinkedIn because our names are Marnie Stockman and Nick Coniglio. So that definitely narrows the playing field quite a bit. And then leaditlikelasso.com has the links to where you can buy our books, etc., or buy Lead It Like Lasso. And then the businessofyou.ai is where you can find us for the Business of You. They're available on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, etc. And we are on all of the social medias as Lead It Like Lasso and as Blue, the Business of You. Did I miss any, Nick? Okay, it's a lot. So thank you.
Yeah, got them all.
Good. Well, we'll put all of those in the show notes as well. So again, thank you so much for being our guest on Suits and Sneakers Leadership Unfiltered. All the best for the future for you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Carrie.
We're glad you joined us for Suits and Sneakers. If you want to be an expert guest, look for the link in the show notes. Don't forget to follow or subscribe to be notified of future episodes.